Hey everyone, it's Kevin with Upkeep Games here to talk about the new ban announcements that happened on June 30th. Wizards went ahead and banned 7 cards out of Standard, which is a lot, but it's kind of on par for what we've been seeing lately. So, without further ado, let's get right into it. So, let's go ahead and say goodbye to these 7 cards: Hopeless Nightmare, This Town Ain't Big Enough, Up the Beanstalk, Quarry Steelcutter, Monstrous Rage, Abuela's Awakening, and Heartfire Hero. Wizards really did gut the aggro strategy. It had a really strong showing at Pro Tour. And then they also obviously wanted to gut some of the strategies that were going to be coming up behind it. So bounce strategies, leveraging Hopeless Nightmare in This Town Ain't Big Enough. The Omniscience combo deck, which was using Abuela's Awakening, and Up the Beanstalk, which also gave a ton of card advantage to some of the Domain Overlord piles. So excited to see where the format's going to go after these bans came through and after the gutting. So I have some picks that I think for the top decks to look out for in the coming months. So let's get into those. First and foremost, I think one of the biggest winners is going to be Black X Midrange. So these Black X Midrange strategies, a lot of 3 drops, a lot of good black base removal and interaction, but really held up by card advantage engines like Unholy Annex, Preacher of the Schism, and Kaido Bane of Nightmares. Right, these decks are already doing fairly well, but we're just a little too slow in the Monstrous Rage, Quarry Steelcutter formats. So we'll see if it's slowing down a little bit can help them become the mid-range deck of choice. The next winner was a deck that was kind of a breakout from Pro Tour Final Fantasy. We saw VV Cauldron, right? It's a deck that uses VV and Soul Cauldron and Winter Night Stories to really make large creatures and churn through a lot of its deck and get a lot of counters, and eventually just combo out with throwing a large countered creature using the Voldaren Thrill Seeker's ability. So looks like a really good pivot for a lot of the prowess players. It's a lot of the same play patterns, something to keep an eye out. Next is my personal favorite. I'm a big fan of this archetype, the Una Overlords. So Domain Overlords lost Up the Beanstalk, which cut its legs out in a lot of ways. It's also losing Leyline Binding and during rotation, but using cards like Una and Fear of Missing Out, the new Joshua to help self-mill and loot away some effects, and you try to get out some of these Overlords or even Summon Knights of the Round or Bahamut out early to really go over the top. I think it's got the tools to really kind of compete in the new standard. Let's see what else. The newest, the probably the premier aggro deck of the format's probably in the foreseeable future going to be this red green delirium package. So using a lot of the 1 and 2 drops that fuel and use delirium, Patchwork Beastie, Wildfire, Wickerfolk, Fear of Missing Out, and then closing the game out quickly with a delirious Violent Urge. It's probably a good way for aggro players to start playing in the new format. Black Green Roots also looks pretty strong. It's only losing Tyvar during rotation, and it's got a lot of self mill and other things to create these really cumbersome and hard to deal with board states. So I think the archetype probably survives fairly well. I don't know how well it's going to do without Tyvar, but it's still going to be a thing. All right. And then Blue White Control was already doing fairly well. It had the tools to kind of compete. It stood up by Lightning Helix, other white base removal, blue interaction, but really the dragons from the recent Tarkir set, both Shiko and Meringue River Regent, do a lot to help prop up this archetype and make sure that it's got some good staying power. So I definitely keep an eye out for this if you're a control player. And last but not least, a deck that's also near and dear to my heart is Jeskai Oculus. So it didn't lose much, and it's not losing much during rotation except for some of the lands. But I think the deck has a lot of potential to be a really good tempo deck for people to pick up and play, right? Fear of Missing Out works really well with Prost Eidetic Memory, and the fact that you get multiple counter triggers, going wide, going tall, and it's got some really good ways to kind of beat around like other decks as far as interaction. So I think it's a solid choice. With that being said, I also wanted to segue into some things that I think picking up in the next few weeks would be ideal for people, right? So some of the cards that are stand out that see play in multi-formats or multi-archetypes, Unholy Annex, Kaido, Fear of Missing Out, and VV, these are individual cards. But I think the biggest pickup probably is going to be wanting to grab all of the Verges you're going to need. We recently saw that Shocklands got spoiled in Edge of Eternity, so I think that picking up the mana while it's cheap before rotation occurs when we lose some of the pain lands and some of the other fast lands to set yourself up in a good spot for new standards, probably a good idea. And with that being said, thanks for tuning in and listening. I'd like to hear any of your feedback you have. If there's any cards or decks or archetypes you're interested in or think are going to be doing well in the new standard, go ahead and drop a comment. And also, don't forget to follow us at the Upkeep A2 on Facebook and the Upkeep Games on TikTok. And for all of your gaming and hobby needs, feel free to visit our online store or any of the 2, soon to be 3 stores we have in Southeast Michigan. Have a good one, guys.